at Woodside is probably what our favorite park was.
Yeah,
You want to talk a little?
Windmuller Park.
Yeah,
It was a great park.
yeah. It wasn't particularly big, although there was like a baseball diamond down there too that we didn't even
Yeah,
really interact with. But
there was a track too. It was a pretty big. I think it was a pretty
it
nice
was it
size.
was a large, small park.
Yeah, it was it's on the top of a hill, and it's sort of like different sections. So I guess each section doesn't feel that big, but then there's 4 sections, I think.
Yeah, something
So
like
it's
that.
yeah, large, small, I think is a
Yeah.
good way to describe it. But yeah, the first section is just a round area with cobblestones or concrete stones or something like that.
Decorative paving stones.
Yeah. And there's benches all around that circle. And then up some stairs, there's a playground, and then there's also an open area. And 2 days in a row, we went right around 10 o'clock, and there was the same woman both days. She brought in one of those rolling carts, a big speaker, and she was teaching Zumba. And it was this is why it was our favorite park, because there were a bunch of people that were in the Zumba class, but then there were also just throughout the park people that were following along doing it. And the people in the Zumba class were really doing it the whole time. But then everywhere you looked, there'd be someone doing it for a couple minutes and then stopping. And then you'd look over and they're doing it again. And then they're doing their own thing. And then they're doing it. But everyone's there to exercise. There was a guy walking up and down the stairs holding a tennis racket, just walking up and down the stairs. I think he did 15 laps up and down the stairs, and every time he came up with his tennis, I don't even know if there was a tennis court.
There was no tennis court in Windmuller Park.
There were, though, those handball courts.
That's true.
And sometimes I see people hitting a tennis ball against that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a real scene. It was great. One guy came in to the circular bench area at one point. We were sitting, taking a break, drinking some water. He was all the way across. He came in. He had on a short sleeve business shirt. He unbuttoned the business shirt and took it off. And I was like, oh, wow, he's really going to do some major exercises now. But then he just sat down and started eating a sandwich. And then later he did some stretching. But it was one of those spaces where it felt like everybody, there was no self-consciousness, which I think is what I really liked about it. It wasn't like anyone was trying to impress each other with their exercises. It wasn't like that at all. It was just this is a space where people can do their own exercising, whatever that means to them, and it can be whatever level you want it to be of engagement. But it really didn't seem like anyone was looking at each other with any sort of judgment or doing anything in a way that was showing off. It was just a nice kind of even democratic exercise space, if you will.
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable how, maybe we should have asked that lady more about the Zumba. I'd be curious to know how long they've been doing it and whatnot, because we would also, when we go the reverse direction, we'd get there at 2 or 3 or whatever, and there'd still be people stretching and doing things, which made me feel like the Zumba energy resonated throughout the day. And I wondered if the Zumba started that energy or if that was predated, if it had always been a park that's like that. But there's just something about that I can see it pretty clearly in my head that the Zumba stops, but there are still people stretching, and that informs other people that it's an okay area to stretch.
Right.
And then it just kind of, continues.
Continues throughout the day.
Yeah,
that makes sense. I guess if we go back through there, we could strike up a conversation with her. I think one thing that we had planned in general for this project was that we expected to be in more specific locations, going into places. And then obviously with COVID, we can't do that. Places are either closed or we just don't feel like it's comfortable or responsible to be going into locations and sitting down and chatting for any significant amount of time. But what that means is that we if we want to engage with people, it's going to be on us. Because what we're doing is bizarre, but you don't know it just by looking at us, you know?
Yeah.
It's not like anyone's witnessing us walk the entire day. They just see, oh, there's some people with backpacks or whatever. We don't particularly stand out in the same way that the Zumba class does. Or we did chat someone up at one point because what he was doing stood out more.
Yeah.
So
Let's wait for him.
We'll wait for him. But I think one reason why I didn't talk to the woman running the Zumba is because I feel like we're kind of needing to get into that way of engaging people.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been difficult. I mean, we did get there one day right before they started. So that would have been the time to be decisive about it.
Although she also got there right before they started.
Yeah. Yeah. One day we got there and it was already happening. Another day we got there, she rolled up and then pretty much started 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden people just like congregated and it started. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree that it is incumbent upon us to make it happen. There's definitely an equation that's in our heads, or in my head, as far as outreach at any given time. And much like trying to figure out what the right balance of documentation is, I feel similarly about that, where I don't want to be too hard on myself, because ultimately we're walking constantly, and there's so much exertion involved in what's going on. It would be one thing if we were doing a walk every street in New York project, where if you're doing it over the course of 6 years and you're only walking 5 or 6 miles a day, you're like, you have full energy and you see something and you engage that.
Right, and you have the time to do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas, time is definitely a factor in our process every day. How much time we have once we get home to like do preparation for the next day and relax at all. And also just there is a version of this where just perceiving things passively is a thing that happens too.
Sure.
I told Jesse this morning, and it wasn't something I had thought about, and I hadn't put it together until I'd had some time to marinate on it, but one of the days that Jesse was walking, or one of the days that Jesse was at her studio, I saw a man at a park who's like kind of a tough guy looking out at the water and listening to George Michael's Careless Whisper, which was really funny. And then another day where I was with Jesse at a different park, I heard somebody, couldn't spot them visually, but they were playing Careless Whisper on one of those park xylophones, that come with a playground set. And, I could hear them struggling through it, like missing a note, but then figuring out how to do it. And that just made me think about, where we're seeing the same people occasionally, once or twice each week, and then like things repeat as far something like that, being aware of the idea that there's like some sort of energy that pervades spaces, cities and whatnot, that if you're spending some time just being open to it, you can kind of tap into.
Yeah. Finding patterns, I guess, is what it is.
Yeah.
Which there's certainly, there's a lot of people that have done that in different ways. I know my friend Emily used to take pictures of playing cards, and they're all over the city.
Mm-hmm.
And then she also was always seeing like the infinity sign just on the ground with different things of trash. So there's like little things like that. I think there's plenty of people that are doing it like over long periods of time to sort of noticing one particular thing. But yeah, I like this, like, I don't know that we'll notice George Michael's Careless Whisper throughout the year.
No.
I hope we do, because it's a fantastic song. But but it might be more like week to week. There might be things that we notice that there's patterns in those particular period of time.
Yeah.